The slap echoed across the parking lot like a gunshot. Officer Brad Mitchell, 28 years old and white, had just struck a 67-year-old black man in front of a dozen witnesses. What Mitchell didn't know was that the man he just assaulted was retired. Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Washington, 35-year veteran of both the Marines and Detroit Police Department. And what happened next would prove that some actions have consequences that stretch far beyond what the attacker could ever imagine. Because 30 minutes later, Lieutenant Colonel Washington would make a phone call that would change Mitchell's life forever. If you believe in accountability and justice, hit that subscribe button and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Brad Mitchell had been a problem since his first day at the Detroit Police Department 6 years earlier. At 28, he was everything wrong with modern policing: arrogant, aggressive, and completely convinced that his badge made him untouchable. Mitchell came from a middle-class suburban family where he'd been told his whole life that he was special. When he struggled in college and barely graduated with the 2.3 GPA, he decided that police work would give him the respect and authority he felt he deserved. From the beginning, Mitchell had viewed his job as a license to intimidate rather than a commitment to serve. He'd accumulated 47 civilian complaints in 6 years, complaints about excessive force, verbal abuse, illegal searches, and unprofessional conduct. But every complaint had been dismissed or resulted in minimal discipline. Mitchell's supervising sergeant, Tom Bradley, had protected him because Mitchell made good arrest numbers. Captain Steve Reynolds had overlooked his misconduct because Mitchell was willing to work overtime and fill difficult shifts. The department's Internal Affairs Division had learned to minimize investigations involving Mitchell because higher-ups didn't want the paperwork or bad publicity. Mitchell had learned that as long as he didn't seriously injure anyone or get caught on video, he could treat civilians, especially black civilians, however he wanted. He developed a particular talent for provoking people just enough to justify escalating force, but stopping just short of actions that would trigger serious scrutiny. His fellow officers knew Mitchell was a loose cannon, but the blue wall of silence protected him. Nobody wanted to be labeled a snitch or risk retaliation for reporting a colleague, but Officer Mitchell was about to discover exactly who he had just assaulted and why. That was the worst mistake of his life. Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Washington was everything Mitchell wasn't: disciplined, respectful, and genuinely committed to serving others. At 67, he carried himself with the bearing of a man who had earned respect through decades of honorable service. Samuel had joined the Marines straight out of high school in 1974, serving 2 tours in various peacekeeping operations and rising through the ranks based on merit, leadership, and an unshakable moral compass. He'd retired from the Marines as a lieutenant colonel in 1999 after 25 years of service, but Samuel wasn't finished serving. At 50, he joined the Detroit Police Department as a lateral entry officer, bringing his military discipline and leadership experience to civilian law enforcement. Despite starting as a patrol officer at an age when most cops were thinking about retirement, Samuel had quickly distinguished himself. He'd been promoted to detective within 2 years, sergeant within 4, and lieutenant within 7. Samuel had specialized in training and professional development, becoming the department's expert on military-style discipline and ethical leadership. During his 10 years with Detroit PD, Samuel had trained over 300 officers, including many who now held supervisory positions throughout the department. He'd been instrumental in developing the department's use of force policies, its community policing initiatives, and its professional standards protocols. Samuel had retired from the police department in 2009 with full honors, having served his community with distinction in both military and civilian capacities. In retirement, he'd remained active in veterans affairs and police training, often speaking at academies about leadership and integrity. That Tuesday afternoon, Samuel was simply trying to buy groceries for his wife Margaret, who was recovering from hip surgery. He'd driven his 2015 Toyota Camry to the Meijer supermarket on 8 Mile Road, parked carefully in a space near the entrance, and spent 45 minutes shopping for the items on Margaret's list. The parking lot confrontation began when Samuel was loading his groceries into his car. Officer Brad Mitchell, off duty and driving his personal vehicle, had been circling the lot looking for a convenient parking space. When he saw Samuel's space near the entrance, Mitchell decided he wanted it. Instead of waiting for Samuel to finish loading his groceries and leave, Mitchell pulled up behind Samuel's car, blocking him in, and got out. "Hey, old man," Mitchell called out, his voice carrying the aggressive tone he used when he wanted to intimidate someone. "You need to hurry up. Other people are waiting for that space." Samuel looked up from his groceries, immediately recognizing the attitude and body language of someone looking for confrontation. In his years of military and police service, he dealt with countless bullies and had learned to stay calm in tense situations. "I'll be finished in just a moment, young man," Samuel replied politely, continuing to load his bags. Mitchell, already irritated by Samuel's calm response, decided to escalate. "I don't have all day to wait for some old geezer who doesn't know how to move efficiently." Samuel straightened up and looked directly at Mitchell. Despite being 67 years old, Samuel was still imposing 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, with the confident bearing of someone who had commanded respect from Marines and police officers for decades. "Son, I'm moving as quickly as I can. You'll have the space in another minute." Mitchell took Samuel's calm response as disrespect. In his mind, when he spoke aggressively to people, they were supposed to become intimidated and apologetic. Samuel's composed reaction challenged Mitchell's sense of authority. "Don't call me son, old man. I'm a police officer, and you need to show some respect." Samuel placed his last bag in the car and turned to face Mitchell fully. "Officer, I've shown you nothing but respect. I suggest you do the same." The phone call Colonel Washington was about to make would set in motion a chain of events that would shake the entire police department. Mitchell's anger boiled over. Here was an elderly black man who refused to be intimidated, who spoke to him as an equal, rather than showing the deference Mitchell believed he deserved. "You need to learn your place," Mitchell snarled, stepping closer to Samuel. Samuel recognized the signs of an officer who was about to escalate to physical violence. He'd seen it countless times during his career: the clenched fists, the invasive posture, the verbal aggression designed to provoke a reaction that would justify force. "Officer, I'm going to get in my car and leave now," Samuel said calmly, reaching for his car door handle. Mitchell interpreted Samuel's movement toward the car as an attempt to dismiss him, to end the conversation without acknowledging Mitchell's authority. In Mitchell's twisted worldview, this was the ultimate sign of disrespect. "Don't you dare turn your back on me," Mitchell shouted. Before Samuel could respond, Mitchell struck him across the face with an open-handed slap that echoed across the parking lot. The slap was loud enough and violent enough to draw the attention of everyone within 50 yards. A woman with 2 small children gasped and pulled her kids closer. An elderly couple loading groceries into their car stopped and stared in shock. A teenage employee collecting shopping carts pulled out his phone and started recording. Samuel staggered slightly from the unexpected blow, but didn't fall. At 67, he was still strong and balanced from decades of physical training. More importantly, he'd been hit before during his military and police careers and knew how to absorb and recover from physical attacks. Mitchell expected Samuel to either cower in fear or retaliate physically. Either reaction would have suited Mitchell's purposes. Cowering would have satisfied his need to dominate, and retaliation would have given him justification to claim self-defense. Instead, Samuel Washington did something that completely disrupted Mitchell's expectations. He straightened up, looked Mitchell directly in the eyes, and spoke in the calm, authoritative voice of someone who had commanded Marines in combat situations. "Officer, you have just committed assault and battery against a senior citizen in front of multiple witnesses. You're going to face consequences for this action." The parking lot had become a crime scene, though Mitchell didn't yet realize it. The teenage employee, Marcus Johnson, had captured the entire confrontation on his phone, including the slap and its aftermath. Mrs. Dorothy Martinez, 54, a nurse at Detroit General Hospital, had witnessed the assault while loading groceries with her twin daughters. She immediately approached Samuel to check if he needed medical attention. "Sir, are you hurt? Do you need me to call an ambulance?" Samuel touched his cheek, which was red and stinging from Mitchell's slap. "I'm fine, thank you, but I would appreciate it if you could give me your contact information as a witness to what just happened." Robert Chen, 38, a local business owner, had also seen the assault. He approached with his business card already in hand. "I saw the whole thing. That officer attacked you for no reason. I'll testify to that." Mitchell, realizing that the situation was not going as he'd planned, tried to regain control. "Everyone needs to mind their own business," he announced loudly, his hand moving instinctively toward where his service weapon would be if he were on duty. "This is police business." Samuel stepped forward, his military bearing evident. "Officer, you were off duty, out of uniform. and have just committed a crime. This is no longer police business. This is criminal business. What Mitchell didn't know was that his victim had trained half the current police leadership and still had friends in very high places. Samuel Washington got into his car and drove home without further incident. Mitchell, realizing he'd made a mistake, but not understanding how serious it was, returned to his own vehicle and left the scene. At home, Samuel's wife Margaret immediately noticed the red mark on his face. "Samuel, what happened to you?" Samuel explained the confrontation calmly, playing down the seriousness of the assault to avoid worrying his wife. "Some young police officer got angry about a parking space and slapped me. It's nothing serious, but I need to make some phone calls." Margaret was horrified. "Samuel, you need to press charges immediately. No one has the right to put their hands on you." Samuel nodded. "I will, but first, I need to find out exactly who this officer is and what kind of pattern of behavior he has." Samuel's first call was to Lieutenant Maria Rodriguez, current head of internal affairs for the Detroit Police Department. Rodriguez had been one of Samuel's trainees during his time with the department and had risen through the ranks based on the leadership principles he'd taught her. "Colonel Washington," Rodriguez said warmly when she recognized his voice. "How are you and Margaret doing?" "We're fine, Maria, but I need to report an incident involving one of your officers." Samuel described the assault in detail, providing the officer's physical description and the license plate number he'd memorized from Mitchell's car. "Sir, that sounds like Officer Brad Mitchell, and if it is, you're not his first victim. Mitchell has been a problem for years, but somehow his complaints always get buried. Maria, I want you to pull Mitchell's complete file, every complaint, every incident report, every disciplinary action. I also want you to identify who has been protecting him and why." Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. "Colonel, with all due respect, that kind of investigation could ruffle some feathers at the supervisory level." Samuel's voice took on the tone he'd used when commanding Marines. "Maria, I didn't spend 35 years serving this country and this community to watch some punk in a uniform assault senior citizens for sport." "Pull the file." "Yes, sir. I'll have it for you by tomorrow morning." Samuel's second call was to Colonel James Patterson, his former commanding officer in the Marines, who now worked as a consultant on military-civilian police cooperation. "Sam, good to hear from you. What can I do for you?" Samuel explained the situation and his concerns about the officer's pattern of behavior. "Jim, I need you to help me understand something. In the Marines, if an officer assaulted a civilian, there would be immediate consequences. But this police officer seems to have been getting away with misconduct for years. How is that possible?" Colonel Patterson sighed. "Sam, it's the same problem we've been talking about for years. Some police departments have developed a culture of protecting bad officers instead of holding them accountable. It's the opposite of military discipline. What's the best way to ensure this officer faces real consequences? Document everything. Get witnesses. Make sure the investigation is handled by someone who can't be pressured to cover it up. And if necessary, go federal." Samuel's third call was to Mayor Patricia Williams, who had been a city councilwoman when Samuel was training community policing officers for the department. "Colonel Washington, this is an unexpected pleasure. What can I do for you?" Samuel explained the assault and his concerns about the officer's history. "Mayor Williams, I've served this city faithfully for decades. I've trained officers, developed policies, and worked to build trust between police and community. When one of your officers assaults a senior citizen in broad daylight, it undermines everything we've worked to build." Mayor Williams was immediately concerned. "Colonel, this is completely unacceptable. I want a full investigation, and I want it handled at the highest levels. No cover-ups, no minimal discipline. Real accountability." When Internal Affairs opened the file on Officer Mitchell, they discovered a pattern of abuse that had been hidden for years. Lieutenant Rodriguez's investigation into Officer Mitchell's file revealed a shocking pattern of misconduct that had been systematically covered up. The file showed 47 civilian complaints over 6 years, 12 complaints of excessive force, 18 complaints of verbal abuse and unprofessional conduct, 8 complaints of illegal searches, 9 complaints of intimidation and harassment, but the disciplinary actions told a different story. 41 complaints dismissed as unfounded, 4 complaints resulted in verbal counseling, 2 complaints resulted in additional training. 0 complaints resulted in suspension or meaningful disciplinary dries. Discovered that Sergeant Bradley had been dismissing complaints by claiming witnesses were unreliable or that Mitchell's actions were justified. Captain Reynolds had been rubber stamping Bradley's recommendations without independent review. Even more disturbing, Rodriguez found evidence that some complaints had been altered or suppressed entirely. 3 separate incidents involving excessive force had been reclassified as resisting arrest to make Mitchell's actions appear justified. The pattern showed a clear bias in Mitchell's victims. 83% were African American, 12% were Hispanic, and 5% were white. The white victims were typically elderly or appeared homeless people Mitchell viewed as unlikely to pursue complaints effectively. Rodriguez also discovered that Mitchell had been involved in 2 incidents that should have triggered automatic investigation but had been handled informally. A traffic stop where Mitchell had drawn his weapon on an unarmed motorist who was later found to have done nothing wrong. An arrest where Mitchell had used force against a handcuffed suspect, captured on another officer's body camera, but never reviewed. When Lieutenant Rodriguez presented her findings to Chief of Police Robert Johnson, the chief realized the department was facing a potential scandal that could destroy careers and cost the city millions in lawsuits. Chief Johnson had been a rookie officer when Colonel Washington was training community policing officers. He respected Washington's integrity and understood that covering up this assault would be both morally wrong and practically impossible. Lieutenant Rodriguez, I want you to conduct a full investigation, not just of Officer Mitchell, but of everyone who enabled his misconduct. If supervisors have been covering up complaints, they need to face consequences too. The investigation revealed that Sergeant Bradley had been dismissing complaints in exchange for Mitchell's willingness to work undesirable shifts and make arrests. That boosted Bradley's statistics. Captain Reynolds had been protecting Bradley because they were old friends who had served together for 15 years. The internal affairs investigation also uncovered financial irregularities. Mitchell had been claiming overtime for court appearances that never happened, with Bradley's approval. The fraudulent overtime claims totaled over $23,000 over 3 years. News of the assault spread quickly through Detroit's law enforcement community. When reporters learned that a decorated Marine colonel and retired police lieutenant had been assaulted by an off-duty officer, the story became front-page news. The video captured by the teenage employee had been posted online and was viewed over 500,000 times in the first 24 hours. The clear footage showed Mitchell's unprovoked assault on an elderly man who was simply trying to load groceries into his car. Colonel Washington agreed to a television interview with Channel 7 News. Anchor Sarah Martinez asked, "Colonel Washington, how do you feel about Officer Mitchell's actions?" Samuel replied calmly, "I'm disappointed, but not surprised. In my 35 years of service, I've seen what happens when institutions fail to hold people accountable. Officer Mitchell's behavior is the predictable result of years of enabling and cover-ups. What do you want to see happen to Officer Mitchell?" "I want to see justice, not revenge." "Justice?" Officer Mitchell should face the same consequences any civilian would face for assaulting a senior citizen, and the supervisors who protected him should be held accountable for enabling his misconduct. The consequences of one slap would ripple through the entire department, exposing corruption at the highest levels. The investigation's findings were released to the public 2 weeks after the assault. The revelations shocked even experienced observers of police misconduct. Officer Brad Mitchell was arrested and charged with assault and battery, fraud overtime, claims violation of civil rights under color of law. Sergeant Tom Bradley was demoted and transferred after internal charges of failure to properly investigate complaints, falsifying official reports, conduct unbecoming an officer. Captain Steve Reynolds was forced to retire after internal charges of failure to supervise subordinates, negligent oversight of complaint investigations, pattern of covering up misconduct. The city of Detroit settled a civil lawsuit filed by Colonel Washington for $150,000, with the settlement including a formal apology and commitment to police reform. But the most significant consequence was the implementation of new oversight procedures. All excessive force complaints would be reviewed by an independent civilian board. Body camera footage would be automatically reviewed for any use of force incident. Officers with patterns of complaints would face mandatory retraining or dismissal. Supervisors would be held accountable for failure to address subordinate misconduct. Officer Mitchell's criminal trial became a symbol of police accountability. Colonel Washington testified about the assault with the same calm professionalism he'd shown during his military and police careers. Officer Mitchell struck me without justification, without warning, and without remorse, Samuel testified. But this case isn't really about one slap. It's about a pattern of behavior that was enabled by a system that protected the wrong people. The defense attorney tried to argue that Mitchell had been having a bad day and that his actions were out of character. Colonel Washington's response was devastating. "Sir, I've reviewed Officer Mitchell's complaint history. 47 complaints in 6 years isn't a bad day. It's a bad career built on the assumption that his badge made him untouchable." The prosecution presented evidence of Mitchell's pattern of misconduct, showing that the assault on Colonel Washington was the culmination of years of increasingly aggressive behavior. Mitchell was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 18 months in prison with 3 years probation. The judge specifically noted that Mitchell's abuse of his position as a police officer warranted enhanced punishment. The Washington reforms became a model for police departments across the country. The reforms required independent investigation of all excessive force complaints, civilian oversight of police disciplinary actions, mandatory reporting of officer misconduct by supervisors, financial penalties for departments that fail to address problem officers, regular review of officers with multiple complaints. Colonel Washington was invited to consult with police departments nationwide on implementing similar reforms. "The goal isn't to punish good officers," Samuel explained to a conference of police chiefs. "The goal is to protect good officers by removing the bad ones who make everyone look bad." 1 year after the assault, Samuel Washington received a letter from Marcus Johnson, the teenage employee who had recorded the incident. "Colonel Washington, I wanted you to know that your case inspired me to apply to the police academy. I want to be the kind of officer who protects people instead of hurting them. Thank you for showing me that standing up for what's right is always worth it." Samuel smiled as he read the letter. The assault had been painful and humiliating, but it had led to changes that would protect countless other people from similar abuse. He called Lieutenant Rodriguez, who was now Captain Rodriguez thanks to her ethical handling of the investigation. "Maria, I got a letter from that young man who recorded the assault. He's applying to be a police officer." "That's wonderful, Colonel. Will you be involved in his training? If he makes it through the academy, I'd be honored to help train him. We need officers who understand that the badge is a responsibility, not a license." Brad Mitchell served 14 months of his sentence and was released on good behavior. He was permanently barred from law enforcement and struggled to find employment. Due to his criminal record, Sergeant Bradley, demoted to patrol officer, retired early with reduced benefits. He never acknowledged his role in enabling Mitchell's misconduct. Captain Reynolds moved to Florida and took a security job at a shopping mall, bitter about what he saw as unfair treatment. But the positive changes far outweighed the individual consequences. Police complaints in Detroit dropped by 34% in the year following the reforms. Use of force incidents decreased by 28%. Community trust in police increased measurably. Most importantly, problem officers were being identified and removed before they could accumulate years of misconduct. Today, Colonel Samuel Washington continues to work with police departments on accountability and reform. At 70, he travels the country teaching current and future officers about the true meaning of service. "People ask me if I regret what happened that day in the parking lot," Samuel tells police academy classes. "I don't. That slap led to changes that have protected thousands of people from police misconduct. Sometimes you have to stand up to bullies, even when they wear badges." The last slide in Samuel's presentation shows a simple message. The badge is a privilege earned through service, not a right granted through employment. Marcus Johnson graduated from the police academy and now works as a community policing officer in Detroit. He keeps a photo of Colonel Washington on his desk as a reminder of what real police work should look like. If you believe that police officers should be held to the highest standards of conduct, hit that subscribe button and share this story. In the comments, tell us about a time when standing up for what's right led to positive change. We read every comment and try to respond to as many as we can. Remember, true authority comes from respect earned through service, not fear imposed through power.